What's going on, guys, and welcome to a new driver improvement video series powered by DGFX Racing. Main goal in this video series is to try and improve driver awareness and look at different common aspects of multi-class endurance sports car racing, and look at different incidents and analyze the incident, see what could be done differently, if anything, and show you good examples, show you bad examples. That way everyone can kind of learn and hopefully implement that type of, or what we cover, into their own racing to improve on their own driving. Now, the information that we're going to be discussed is primarily focused on sports car racing, specifically the DGFX Endurance Series, which commonly uses full course cautions. Now, while everything might not transfer over to other series such as Neo or in real life, generally speaking, everything, most of it will be able to transfer over, and you can take from it what you need. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, though, is generally agreed upon with a lot of the experienced drivers within iRacing themselves, as well as what we see in real-life series such as WEC, ELMS, the Asian Le Mans Series, and IMSA, as well as other multi-class series that are out there. So we would like to start, but real quick before we start, one last thing is that while we'll be looking at a lot of DGFX races, if at any point you want us to go over an incident or talk about something, feel free, shoot us an email with the replay file to dgfxracing@gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do to discuss it and talk about that and get it into a future episode. So today's episode, first episode, we're going to be talking about a common theme within multi-class endurance racing and a common theme on iRacing in general, which is blue flags. So one thing that we want to talk about first is multi-class racing in general. Now, multi-class racing isn't always about the fastest person and the fastest outright speed. When you look at Formula One or other single make series that are shorter series, it's a lot about, okay, outright speed, who can go the fastest. With multi-class sports car racing, it's not so much about the outright speed, but more so about who can lose the least amount of time in traffic, because it's inevitable that you will lose time, but it's just a matter of how much do you lose. And those that are really good with traffic management are going to lose the least amount of time, but also they're going to gain the most respect within their competitors and their peers that are out there on the track with them. So one of the big things that we hear on the iRacing forums and within DGFX is blue flag, you gotta get over, you can't ignore the blue flag. Well, unlike Formula One, the blue flag in iRacing doesn't mean you need to get over right away. Within DGFX, it's the same way, and within iRacing, it's the same way. Not the same way. iRacing it's more informational, and it even says so in the sporting code. So when we look at the sporting code, specifically in section 7.4, it specifically talks about the blue flag. And what it states is, a blue flag with a diagonal yellow stripe indicates faster cars are approaching. This flag is informational only. In all cases, it is a responsibility of the faster car to safely overtake the slower car. It is a responsibility of the slower car to maintain a consistent line. It is strongly recommended that a slower car being lapped makes every reasonable effort to facilitate a safe pass. In DGFX, we add another line to that, and we say a car with a blue flag, if the faster car behind them is within 1 to 2 set car lengths behind you, you have to, as quickly and safely as possible, help facilitate the pass. Now, let's talk about how to facilitate passes and certain things you want to keep in mind. From our experience and what you see around the world, the best way to facilitate a pass, or to help facilitate a pass as a slower car, if possible, is to let the faster car go by on the inside on the entrance to the corner. What this will allow usually is because the cars that are faster usually have more grip and more handling through the corners. They can carry more speed even though they have a narrower line. What this will allow for you to do is to brake a little earlier and then slot right in behind the faster car, and then you'll be able to hit your apex and carry on. Minimal time lost. Now, the end goal when dealing with blue flags and multi-class passing and passing cars with blue flags is you want to make sure that whatever you do for helping facilitate the pass, or if you are doing the pass, is to make sure that it is the minimal amount of time lost between both cars, not just for yourself. Because a prototype, you can go throwing it up the inside of a car, only lose a tenth. But if it sends the GT cars out and the GT car off and he spins or hits the wall and ends his race or does something, the net time lost between the two of you is huge. And that's not what you want, because no person's race is more important than anybody else's. So just because you're in a slower class or just because you're a lap down, it doesn't mean that your race is much less important than the cars that are faster or that are in a different class. Everybody's out there on the track. Everybody's race means the same. So you need to be able to understand from both perspectives that it's all about losing the least amount of time between all parties involved, not just for yourself. Now, doing it where the faster car passes on the inside, slower car on the outside is the best way to do it. The slower car can simply lift a little earlier, brake sooner, and then once we get to turn in is hopefully behind the car in front, and it'll slot right in and be able to pass. Usually when that happens, on most normal circumstances, the only net loss between both cars is total is about half a second, so maybe a couple tenths per car. Does it mean that it's always going to be like that? No, every situation is different. For example, when you look at the carousel at Road America, it is very easy for the faster car to just pass on the outside, especially when it's a prototype in GT, simply because the car can do it and it has the downforce to be able to go around the outside. But this is just a general guideline. Now, does this mean that there's never going to be a point in time to where the slower car will be able to pass on or let the faster car go on the outside into a corner? No, not at all. Based on experience, though, generally speaking, when that happens, the slower car loses a lot more time. Because as a slower car, you are now taking a narrower line into the corner, which means that the corner is essentially tighter, so you can't carry as much speed through it, and it might hinder your apex or your exit speed, which will then in turn lose you more time down the straight. One thing that you want to make sure of, though, and this is very true for sports car racing, especially when it comes to GTs and prototypes, is never, 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 never do you want to pass on the outside on the exit of a corner. Slower cars, you want to hold your line and you want to be predictable. And predictable by holding your line means that you will track out and on the exit, and you will go and use all the road on the outside. Plus, when the slower car is committed to it, they don't change directions as quickly as prototypes do. So, prototypes, it's best if you go to the inside of the exit rather than the outside of the exit, because if you go to the outside of the exit, more than likely either you are going to get shoved off or you will get spun and you will get turned, and then it's just bad for everybody. Now, are there certain things that you can do to help facilitate passes as a slower car? Yes. Understand the scenario, understand what's going on. If you're going down a straight, a very common thing to use in iRacing is, while you're going flat out, is tap the brakes a couple times, make your brake lights flash up. That's a general rule or unwritten rule in iRacing that if you see that, the car is going to let you pass, and then you can get off, and then the other car will be able to pass. And it's just a common courtesy type of thing. One thing you don't want to do ever as a slower car is try to get out of the way. When you try to get out of the way, you're generally getting in the way. See, the faster cars are planning ahead, and they feel and they think that you are going to be sticking to your racing line. So they are going to pass you off of the racing line. So when, as a slower car, when you try to get out of the way and move onto or off of the racing line, you're actually moving right into the path of where the faster cars have already committed to going, and that's where incidents happen. Now, let's kind of jump in. We'll go through a couple examples, and we'll see a good example, a couple bad examples, and we'll talk about what could be done differently on different scenarios, and we'll go from there. So the first example that we have is at Daytona. We're kind of to paint the picture, we're in the last 30 minutes of the race. The black car that is ahead is 5 laps down, and then we have the blue car that we're currently on, as well as another, I think, white Ferrari and a Porsche that are all battling for position. Now, one thing I want to discuss and talk about really quick is battles in an endurance race. While all battles and all fights are fun, we really need to make sure that we don't forget the big picture. And the big picture is it is an endurance race. As you hear multiple drivers say, whenever they're interviewed in real life at Le Mans, Daytona, whatever it is, they are always saying we want to make sure our car is in the picture at the end, so then we can battle. We want to make sure we're there at the end. We want to make sure we're at the end. It kind of goes back to that whole saying of, in order to finish first, you must first finish. And that's true in endurance racing. So to kind of elaborate on that mindset and that kind of thought is that you want to make sure to understand that in the big picture, 90 to 95% of the battles that you're having and before the final stint of the race don't mean a whole lot. And you have to understand that you're going to lose time, but you're going to gain time on your competitors. So while you might back off and you're like, oh, well, I'm in a big battle. And, you have 2 cars that are slower that are battling for 15th and 16th, and the leader's coming through. And the leader's like, get out of my way because I'm the leader. And the slower cars are like, well, what makes your race any more important than my race? Which they have a point. But at the same time, you got to understand that what you may lose being one of those slower cars at some point on the circuit and on the track during an endurance race, you will gain back a little bit later. It might not be the next corner, it might not be the next lap, it might not be within 5 laps, but eventually you will gain it back at some point, generally speaking. So let's kind of take a look at what we have going on here. As we see, we're going down the front straight. And remember what we discussed earlier as far as it's good to get out of the way and it's good to make sure that you're helping facilitate the pass as a slower car. So going into turn 1, going into tri-oval, black Ferrari understands he's a slower car, understands he has a blue flag. What does he do? He moves up high and lets the faster car pass on the inside. Now what you're going to see, sorry, I'll back up a little bit. Cycling through cars, press the wrong button. So what you'll see is the Ferrari lets him by on the inside, brakes a little earlier, and then slots in behind and hits the apex. Now the blue Ferrari went a little hot in the corner, didn't get as good of an exit, but generally speaking, I'd say the total lost time between those 2 cars at most maybe half a second, which is great. So textbook example of what you want to do. Neither car lost much time, if any, and they're through and through, everything's fine. Now something you want to understand, as a slower car, are you allowed to unlap yourself? 100% yes. However, you don't want to fight in the process of doing that. And this is going to be really key going into the down to the bus stop. If you are a slower car and if you have cars behind you, if you're never planning to pass, never stick your nose out. It's very common for us to see people stick their nose out in prototypes passing GT cars and never pass. But again, you don't want to fight. So for the black car to be pulling alongside the blue car right here, it's not ideal because now the blue car is hindered on the speed and how we can go through the bus stop because he has to take a tighter entry, and the black car is actually losing more time because he has to brake earlier than what he normally would because he has to slot in behind the blue Ferrari. At no point should you ever truly fight trying to go to the inside unless you're trying to unlap yourself and pass. However, given the situation, because the black car and the black Ferrari just let him by, he shouldn't try to make an in-pass or an attempted pass going in here. Again, trying to go to the outside. Don't do it, because now he's starting to affect the other car's battle. Because the other car has to take a tighter line, has to go and carry less speed through the corner, and what have you. So now he has a textbook opportunity, and he meaning the lap down black Ferrari has a textbook opportunity to do a good example. He has a car with a blue flag within 1 to 2 car lengths behind him going into a pretty hard braking zone. All that the black Ferrari needs to do is move over to driver's left, get on the brakes early, and allow not only the white Ferrari but also the Porsche, which are all battling, past on the inside. Simply move over, hit the brakes, let him go. Does he do it? No. So again, he's affecting the battle that is going on. So we move back up. Not so much that he would do here. Can't really do a ton. And again, I wouldn't really do anything different going into this corner either, because you got to read the situation. But you got to understand the entire situation. And look at what we have here. I'm going to set it up for you. So the blue Ferrari has about 10 car lengths between him and the car behind him. The black Ferrari decides to make a pass on the blue Ferrari. Blue Ferrari does a good job, backs off going in to the bus stop, but he shouldn't have to do it because the car's a lap down. And you can see that the blue Ferrari is starting to get frustrated. He's flashing his lights, but he's being patient. But again, he's flashing his lights. The black Ferrari shouldn't be here whatsoever. This is bad. This is ignoring blue flags. It's not doing your job. This is going against the sporting code. This is going against what we have in DGFX. Then again, black Ferrari takes the inside line, doesn't brake early. What happens? Now the Porsche is able to take the line, and he actually passes the blue Ferrari. So because he is ignoring his blue flags and not doing his job, he has directly influenced the battle that is behind him. Alright, so there's what we could do differently on that one. Let's get into another example, our second example, and we'll kind of discuss things a little bit more. Alright, our next example, we are at Silverstone. We have a red Ford that is up ahead, a white Ford that we are currently following, and an HPD that is behind. The white Ford is a lap ahead of the Ford, the red Ford up in front. So the red Ford will have a blue flag, and the HPD is obviously laps ahead of both. So before we get started on this example, one thing that we want to address here is planning ahead. Now, what I mean by planning ahead is you need to look at and try to plan of where you're going to catch cars. And again, everything will change based on situations and what throws at you, but you need to start thinking ahead and planning ahead of possible places where you could pass them. And also plan ahead and think of places where you could pass him, but it's not ideal to pass them. Given that this is a league race, you got to understand that more than likely you're not going to have a car that is 6, 7, 8 seconds slower than you that you might see in official racing. So planning ahead in a league race is generally easier than planning ahead in official races. So when we follow the Ford, the white Ford, and given the speed difference, planning ahead, you have to think there's really only maybe 2 or 3 places I'll really be able to pass him here. And again, it'll change from corner to corner based on how much you close in on them. So now he's getting close, he's within 1 to 2 seconds, and you're thinking, okay, I might be able to pass him going into this next corner. But using your F3 relative box to understand who's coming up behind you may make that a little bit different. As you'll see, we have a P1 car that comes by here. And you have to think too, realistically, you're not going to outbreak a lot of the cars in league settings and league races by a lot. So if we go back and we look at the HPD, HPD is obviously trying to pass them both. As a prototype driver and HPD driver, and this goes to show for anybody, if you're following multiple cars, for this example, we'll say 2 cars, and the car directly in front of you is laps ahead of the car that's in front of them, you have to understand that while you're trying to get by both of them, the car ahead of you is also trying to get by the car in front of them. So in my experience and what we've seen, while it's not always true, it's probably best if you're that following car, that third car in line, in this example the HPD, to wait and see if you can get a spot to where you can get both of the cars at the same time if the car directly in front of you is unable to get by the car that they're trying to pass. So that's kind of the mindset you'll see with the HPD, and the HPD does a good example of what to do here. Isn't going to be able to pass, breaks a little earlier, slots in behind. And again, this is where the planning ahead comes. He has to know the series of corners that are coming up next, and he has to know the 2 different cars and the characteristics of them. The HPD thrives and gets its speed from faster corners. When you go into slower corners such as hairpins, the prototype isn't that much faster than the GT cars, because where the prototype makes all of its speed is on the faster corners that require downforce, and where the light car is able to be more nimble through the corners and carry more speed. So you have a medium speed, medium to fast speed corner, the right-hander, as well as a medium speed corner, which is the following left-hander, and then 2 hairpins. So planning ahead, the HPD is going to be sitting there thinking, okay, I might be able to pass one of these cars going into the first left-hander, but more than likely I'm going to have to stay behind the first car or the second car in both hairpins. So am I going to gain anything by passing the first car? And the answer really is no. But what you will actually do is you'll lose respect between you and the first car that you passed, because, like I said, you're not really gaining anything from it. And if you're not gaining anything from it, then why do it? And if you're not going to do it, you don't want to stick your nose out there. So HPD does a good job here. He's not going to pass going into the next left-hander, so he stays on the racing line. And again, he stays to the right, and he's able to stay right where he needs to be, and he's just going to follow the cars and going through these next series of corners. Now, that's a great example of what to do. Now let's move on up to the white Ford. One thing that the white Ford needs to understand is patience, because you've realistically only been behind the red Ford for 1 corner to where you could, and I say could with air quotes, effectively pass him. And that's the corner that we're currently in. But it wasn't really going to happen going into this corner, to be quite honest. So again, you got to plan ahead with the white Ford. Now thinking here, not close enough to be able to make a pass going into the right-hander. You could make a pass going into the first left-hander, and you could make a pass going into the left-handed hairpin. Or your third option is to be able to make a pass on the front straight. Now you have to understand though is that you can't have all 3 of those options, because you have to plan ahead. If you want to be able to make a pass into the left-handed hairpin, your second option, you have to give up the first option, which is the first left-hander, because you have to use that corner to set up the pass going into the left-handed hairpin. Now, if you attempt to pass going into the left-handed corner, then you're basically giving up the second option of using the left-handed hairpin to be able to make a pass. Because, again, that left-handed turn you need to use to either set up. So What we're referring to here, and we'll show you this is kind of what we're talking about. Sticks his nose out, whether he's trying to deter the car behind him from passing or he was trying to attempt to pass here, not sure. But since he has committed to this line, he has given up option 2, and he therefore cannot pass going into, in his mind he should be saying, if I don't make this pass, I have to wait till the front straight. There is no way that I'm going to be able to pass going into the left-handed hairpin. Could I pass in the right-handed hairpin? Yes, but it's not going to gain you anything, and you're just going to get worse corner exit. So it's better off just to wait till afterwards. But he's getting frustrated because now that's 2 times to where he couldn't get past. But now look at how far back he is. He's 2 car lengths back going into a quick turning left-handed hairpin, and he decides to send it and dives up the inside. There is no way that he was going to be able to make that stick. Now, what did he do? He lost time because he now slid through the car. Since it's a league race, he more than likely is going to get protested for that, and most likely that'll be called a dive bomb, so he'll lose time because of the penalty. But then he also possibly damaged his own car, so he lost extra time there because that damage could affect his speed. And then he's also lost in respect of the driver ahead of him, because now the driver ahead of him is thinking, oh, well, why did he do that? And now it's like, I'm not going to help him out in the future. So, what could the white car have done differently? Given the same situation, since he went to the inside here, he needs to understand he has given up the next option of being able to pass into this left-handed hairpin. So instead of diving to the inside, what does he do? He falls in line and just tries to get a good exit here and set up to where he can get a better run off of the right-handed hairpin and a better exit to be able to pass the Ford. The other option that he could have done is, instead of passing on the left, is making sure that he follows the Ford through. Now, you could be going this way because it's kind of, I don't want the HPD behind me to pass. But again, HPD, it's the same scenario. What is he going to gain by throwing it up the inside? And is he even close enough, really, to be able to make that kind of pass? No. So the Ford driver should have been able to say, okay, he's not going to pass because he's not close enough. So I will now stay on the racing line, which means getting over to the right, following that Ford through the corner, and trying to get a better exit off of there, to where at this point he might be half a car length back rather than 2 car lengths back. So that's the options that the white Ford could have had to do differently to avoid this situation. Now the red Ford. What could the red Ford have done? Up until this point, nothing. Red Ford did everything right up until this point to be able to do it. Could he have done something on this corner or the prior corner? Yes, but is it ideal? No, because you're going to lose too much time. As he comes through this corner and he sees the white Ford get a little impatient, right now, tap his brakes a couple times. Remember we mentioned earlier, tap your brakes a couple times, and then you'll be able to say, hey, you can pass in this corner. And then simply brake a little sooner, stay to the outside, and let the white Ford go. You can't control what the other car does. You understand that he's getting frustrated. If he's short-tempered, or if that's just the way he is and that's the way he drives, fine, that's the way he drives. But all you need to do then is just move over slightly and then let the Ford pass. And when you let the white Ford pass, that is, now he's going to be off in his distance. You might have lost a little bit more time than ideally that you would have liked, but at the big picture, in order to finish first, you must first finish. And you want to make sure you look after your car and your car alone. And the only way that you can look after your car is by you being able to drive defensively. So that's it. That's kind of what we got today. That's kind of a little look into blue flags, giving an idea here on what could have been done differently on both parties and all parties involved. We gave you some good examples, gave you some bad examples, and hopefully this answers some questions and gives you a little more insight. Again, any other instance you want us to look at, it could be blue flags, could be something different. Feel free, send them on over to dgfxracing@gmail.com, and we'll hopefully get it in here on one of these upcoming videos. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.